Hello and welcome back to, or welcome to my channel. Today we are going to be crocheting this little star tank top. I also have the star design on the back of the top as well, which that part is optional, but I think it's kind of fun to have the design on both the front and the back. In most of my crochet tutorials, I do try to specify the exact amounts of yarn that I end up using, but in this case I used all scrap yarn from my yarn collection, and so I do not know. I apologize for that, but if I was buying yarn brand new, I'd probably buy 2 skeins of yarn of the base color. You might be able to get away with 1, but just to be safe, I would probably buy 2, and then I would just buy 1 skein for each of the accent colors. So again, I apologize for that. I am trying to use up more of my scrap yarn lately, which is why I used it on this top, but without any further ado, here is the tutorial for how to make this adorable little star tank top. For this tutorial, I will be using weight 2 yarn. I believe that this blue one here is mohair, and this one I am not too sure because these are both scrap yarns, but regardless, you just want weight 2 yarn and then a 6mm crochet hook. So the crochet hook is a much bigger size than the yarn itself. I'll be using this blue for the star design in the center of the tank top, and then this cream color for the actual tank top itself. And then I will also be using this weight 4 acrylic yarn as well as a 5mm crochet hook for the border of the tank top. And you can still just use the weight 2 yarn if you want to use the same color throughout. So these 2 colors is all you're going to need, but I do recommend using a heavier weight yarn for the border of the tank top because it does give it a more professional look, but we will revisit this later. For now, we're just going to be focusing on these 2 yarn colors here. So starting with the color for the base of our tank top, which is going to be this cream color here, I'm going to go ahead and just cast on like so. And now we're going to be making this tank top out of 2 separate panels. So we're going to make first the front panel and then the back panel. So you're going to start by making a chain that is long enough for the front panel of the tank top. So this chain should go from one side of your torso to the other, basically covering half of your body. And whatever number that you end up chaining for this panel, you do want to make sure that it is an odd number. So I'm making a size medium, and for that size, I will be chaining 61. So for reference, here you can see I have my chain of 61, which when I hold it to my torso here, it can fit comfortably and wrap around to both sides of my waist with a little bit of extra space on the sides. That way we have a little bit of wiggle room when we attach both of the panels. And then also when I hold it up to my chest here, it is a perfect measurement on both sides as well. And now I know that this panel as well as the entire top will fit comfortably all the way across my chest, my torso, and my waist. So all the way down, it will be a comfortable fit, which is perfect. Do keep in mind that the chain itself is not necessarily an accurate measurement because as you add rows, it will change a little bit in the length. So after we've done a couple rows, I recommend coming back and sort of remeasuring to make sure that you're still happy with this length. So I now have that chain of 61 completed here, and we're going to get started on the very first row. So we are making this top out of double crochets. So I'm first going to chain 2 like so, and then I'm going to go 2 chains down, so into the very third chain here off of the hook. I'm going to insert my hook and then place a double crochet like so. So those 2 extra chains that we made just act as a turning chain, as you can see here. So now we're going to go ahead and just place a double crochet right into the next chain stitch. And now all the way down this entire chain, I'm just going to be placing a double crochet into every single chain stitch all the way to the end. And I am keeping my tension quite loose as I'm doing this. That way we can have a really nice, loose, flowy top. So I'm not holding the yarn too tight. I'm keeping it quite loose as I'm just placing a double crochet into every single chain stitch all the way down to the end of the chain. I have now completed this entire row here of double crochets. So we're going to get started on the next row. So whenever you're doing a double crochet, you're always going to start a row by just chaining 2. So I'm chaining 2 here at the end of the row and then turning my work. And now right into this very first stitch here, so this first double crochet, I'm going to insert my hook and then place another double crochet. So again, just keeping my tension on the looser side, I'm going to go ahead and place 1 double crochet into every single stitch of the previous row, therefore completing a second row. And you are just going to go ahead and repeat this several more times, just completing plain, simple rows of double crochet up until the panel is tall enough that we can add the star. So from the top of the tank top, so like right here where the neckline is, down to the bottom of the star design is going to end up being about 9 inches. So what I'm doing here is I'm holding the top of my ruler up to my neckline here, and then I'm going to measure 9 inches down. So here's 9 inches. So this portion here is all going to be for the star design. So then from here down to my waist, or however long I want the tank top to be, is how long I need the plain double crochet to be. So if I'm measuring from here, and I have my little portion of double crochet that we've been making. From here down, this is now going to be the rest of the tank top. So I did 14 rows here, and then I know that the 9 inches from here to here is going to be the star design. So you can use those measurements to kind of help yourself decide how many rows you need to do for this bottom portion before we begin adding the star design to the tank top. So now I've done those 14 rows, I have the bottom part of the panel completed, and I am ready to start adding the star to this front panel. So let's go ahead and do that. So first I'm just going to chain 2 like usual so I can start a new row, and then I'm going to turn my work. So now, to ensure that the star design is perfectly centered in the middle of the panel, you're going to want to go ahead and take the number that you have used for the chain for this panel, so all the stitches across here, for me that was 61, and then you're going to subtract 15 from that. So then I would have 46, and then you're going to divide that number in half, so then I am left with 23. So do that math for the number of stitches that you have used for your own panel, and then whatever that remaining number is, you're then going to do that number of stitches here in the beginning of the row. So I'm going to go ahead and place 23 double crochets, one after the other. Now that I have completed the required stitches up until this point in the row, we can now begin making the star design. And now I'm going to quickly backtrack and just remove this very last stitch that we made. So I'm just 1 stitch shy from the number I needed. And now I'm going to go ahead and begin to do a double crochet. So I'm going to yarn over, insert my hook right into this stitch, pick up some yarn, pull through 2, and now I'm going to pause here when I still have those 2 loops left on my hook, and now we're going to bring in that accent color. So I'm using the blue yarn, and I'm going to bring this through like so, and I'm just going to pick it up with my hook, and I'm going to pull it right through both loops there of that stitch like so. So that's how you do a tapestry crochet. So now we have the blue yarn that we're working with, and now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to find the strand of the white yarn here, and I'm going to hold it flush to my project. So then when I begin a double crochet, so I'm picking up that blue yarn, and I'm going to then insert my hook right into the next stitch, and I'm going to make sure that that loose part of white yarn, so the tail that we left behind, is on top of my hook. So this loose yarn is on top of my hook. I'm then just going to complete a double crochet here with the blue yarn, like so, and then we're going to do 2 stitches of blue. So again, I'm going to yarn over, I'm going to insert my hook right into the next stitch. Again, I'm making sure that loose strand of white yarn is on top of my hook, and then I'm going to do half of a double crochet. So I'm going to just pull that yarn through 2 loops, and when I still have just 2 loops here left on my hook, we're going to switch back over to white. So I'm going to drop the blue yarn, and I'm going to pick up that white yarn there, and then just pull the white yarn through those 2 loops. So now we have the white yarn back on our hook. And now we're going to do 11 double crochets with the white yarn or that base color. And so as you're doing each of these double crochets, just like we did before, you want to make sure that the loose yarn here, the blue yarn, is on top of your hook. That way when you complete a stitch, that yarn gets sandwiched inside of the stitch, and we're sort of carrying it along with us. So as you can see, that loose yarn is sandwiched inside of the stitch. So again, when I do my second double crochet here, I'm making sure the blue yarn is on top of my hook. That way I can sandwich it into the stitch. And I'm going to go ahead and do 11 double crochets with just this cream or white yarn, and then we're going to switch back to blue. And now on the 11th stitch here, we're going to go ahead and switch back to blue. So I'm going to just pull through those first 2 loops of the double crochet. So I still have 2 loops here on my hook, and then I'm going to go ahead and pick up the blue yarn and pull it through those remaining 2 loops. So now we have the blue yarn here on our hook. And so we're going to do a double crochet with the blue yarn, again making sure that loose white yarn there is on top of our hook, so that way it gets sandwiched into the stitch. And then for our second blue double crochet, I'm going to do half a double crochet, and when I still have those 2 loops on my hook, I'm then going to pick up the white yarn and pull through like so. So now here we have 2 blue stitches, 11 white stitches, and 2 blue stitches. And this is the start of our row for the star, and now we're just going to go ahead and finish the rest of this row. So I'm just going to drop the blue yarn completely. I'm not going to carry it with me anymore. So as I do these next double crochets, I don't have the blue yarn on top of my hook. I'm just leaving it right here, as you can see. And instead, I'm just going to place normal double crochets as we did before, all the way down to the end of the row. And then at the end of the row here, I'm going to go ahead and just chain 2 and then turn my work just like we've been doing before. And now in this next row, you're going to just place double crochets like normal all the way up until you reach the blue stitches here. So now right here, you can see that our next stitch is going to be on top of this blue stitch here, which is perfect. I'm going to yarn over, I'm going to kind of scoop up this little loose blue yarn so it's also on top of my hook. I'm going to insert my hook into that very first of the blue stitches and then pull through like so. So we now have those 3 loops on our hook, pull through the first 2, and now we're going to go ahead and switch colors. So you want to drop your white yarn or whatever your base color is. Now the thing with tapestry crochet is that there is always a right and a wrong side, and you want to make sure you're always dropping your yarn on the wrong side. So typically when you drop yarn, you would just drop it behind you, but because we have the wrong side facing towards us, and you can tell because the loose ends here are on this side facing us, you want to make sure you're dropping the yarn to the wrong side. So instead, I'm going to drop the yarn forward instead of backwards. Okay, so once I have now dropped that white yarn, I'm going to then pick up the blue yarn like so, and then I'm just going to do the rest of that double crochet like so. And so now into the second of these blue stitches of the previous row, we're going to place a blue double crochet, and again, make sure you have that white yarn, the loose yarn here, on top of your hook. That way you're sandwiching the stitch. And now we're going to do 2 more blue double crochets, and then again, making sure we're picking up that loose yarn as well. So here's 1, and now into this third double crochet here of the blue, we're going to go ahead and switch back to white. So I'm going to do half a double crochet, and then when I have those 2 loops there left on my hook, I'm going to switch over to the white yarn and then pull that white yarn through the last 2 loops like so. So now we have those 3 stitches of blue yarn completed, and now we're going to place just double crochets here with the white yarn all the way up until we are 3 stitches away from the first blue stitch here. So once I am 3 stitches away there, I'm going to pause, and as I work my way over here with these double crochets, I'm making sure that the blue yarn is on top of my hook, so that way I'm sort of carrying it with me over to the next stitch. Okay, so now I am 3 stitches away from that very first blue stitch there of the previous row. So now into this next double crochet, I'm going to go ahead and change colors. So I'm going to do half a double crochet, and then with those remaining 2 loops there, I'm going to go ahead and switch over to the blue yarn and then pull that blue yarn through those last 2 loops. And so right into this next stitch, I'm going to place a double crochet, again making sure that loose yarn is on top of my hook. You just want to always make sure that loose yarn is on top of your hook as you're working throughout this design. So now I'm just going to go ahead and place 3 of these blue double crochets here, and the very last of those 3 double crochets should land on top of the first blue stitch of the previous row, like so. And now I'm going to complete just half of this double crochet and then switch right back to white. And now because we're at the very end of the star design for this row, I'm just going to drop the blue yarn. I'm not going to carry it with me anymore, and I'm just going to place double crochets into every single stitch all the way down to the end of the row. And now for this next row, you're just going to be placing a double crochet into every single stitch all the way down until you are just 1 stitch away from that first blue stitch of the star design. And now here I am just 1 stitch away from that first blue stitch of the previous row, so we're going to go ahead and switch colors now. So right into this stitch, I'm going to do a double crochet. We're just going to do half of that double crochet, so we have 2 loops left on our hook. I'm then going to pick up my blue yarn, and again, because there's always a right and a wrong side to tapestry crochet, the wrong side is now facing away from us because we flipped our work, so I'm dropping my yarn here to the back of my project. So therefore I'm dropping it to the wrong side. So then I'm going to pick up the blue yarn and pull it through those 2 loops, like so. So now we're working with the blue yarn, and now I'm going to place 4 double crochets of blue. So right into this very first blue stitch here, I'm going to be placing my first blue double crochet and then carrying that white yarn with me, of course keeping it on top of the hook as I place each stitch. We're going to do 4 double crochets here. And that 4th double crochet should land on the very first of your base color stitches, so the very first of these white stitches should be the 4th double crochet. And we're going to switch colors, so I'm going to do half of the double crochet and then drop my blue yarn and pick up the white yarn and pull that through, like so. And now we are going to place white double crochets carrying that blue yarn with us up until I am just 2 stitches away from the very first of the blue stitches here on the other side of the star design, like so. And now I am 2 stitches away from the very first of those blue stitches. So right into this stitch here, we're going to do half of a double crochet. So pull through those first 2 loops and then switch over to blue or your accent color and pull that through those 2 loops as well. And then we're going to go ahead and do 4 blue double crochets. So the very first of those should be on top of the white stitch here, and then the other 3 are going to be on top of these blue stitches, like so. And as you're doing the tapestry crochet, just like with the rest of this top, you want to make sure you're keeping your tension very loose and that you're not pulling the yarn too much, especially because we have this yarn that we're sort of carrying across the design. You want to make sure you're not pulling this yarn really tight, because then these stitches are going to go like this and just cinch in, and you don't want that. So make sure you're keeping your tension very loose as you're switching colors and you're not pulling this yarn tight every time you switch colors. So now I've just got one last blue double crochet, which should line up perfectly with the stitch of the previous row. And now I'm going to do half of this double crochet and then switch over to white. And now again, because we are done with the star design for this row, we're just going to go ahead and leave that blue yarn behind. I'm not going to carry it with me anymore, and I'm just going to go ahead and do normal double crochets all the way back to the end of this row. And now for this next row here, you want to go ahead and just do those normal double crochets all the way up until you reach the blue stitch here. So the very first blue stitch. Okay, and now right into this very first blue stitch, I'm going to go ahead and pick up that blue yarn so it's over my hook like so, so I'm carrying it with me. And I'm going to go ahead and do half of a double crochet with the white yarn. So we then can switch over to blue, and again, I'm dropping my yarn on the wrong side. So currently the wrong side, as you can see, is facing up. And then I'm going to go ahead and pick up that blue yarn like so. So now we're working with the blue yarn. And then we are going to be doing 5 double crochets here with the blue yarn. So the first 3 of those blue double crochets should line up perfectly with the blue stitches of the previous row. And then the last 2 should be just on top of the white yarn of the previous row. And now into the 5th stitch here of blue, we're going to switch over to white quickly. So again, I'm dropping my yarn forward. I'm going to pick up the white and then pull it through those last 2 loops of the double crochet. And now we're only going to do 1 stitch of white, and we're actually going to switch colors halfway through that stitch as well. So I'm just going to do a double crochet here with the white. Again, I carried that blue yarn with me. I'm just going through the first 2 loops and then switching right over to blue again. So we're just doing 1 stitch of white, like so. And then we're going to do another 5 stitches of blue. So these first 2 white stitches should have blue placed into them like so. And then the next 3 blue stitches are also going to be on top of the blue stitches of the previous row. And now into this 5th stitch here, we're going to switch colors. So I'm going to do half a double crochet, and then I'm going to drop the blue yarn, pick up the white yarn, and then pull that white yarn through those 2 loops of blue. So now we're done with the star design for the rest of this row. So I'm going to leave that blue yarn behind. And now into this last blue stitch of the previous row, I'm going to place a white double crochet like so, and then just double crochet like normal into every single stitch all the way down to the end of the row. And now for this next row, I'm just going to continue double crocheting like normal up until I am only 1 stitch away from the very first blue stitches of the star design here. And now in this last stitch before we hit the first blue stitch here, we're going to go ahead and switch colors. So I'm doing half of a double crochet. I'm going to go ahead and pick up the blue yarn, and I'm going to pull that blue yarn through those last 2 loops like so. And now we are going to be doing 11 blue double crochets. So that should take you from the very first blue double crochet of the previous row all the way over to the very last blue double crochet of the previous row. So all the way from one side to the other of the star. And then remember to just carry that white yarn with you as you go along. And now into that last of the blue double crochets, I'm going to go ahead and switch back to my white color. So I'm going to pull through the first 2 loops, and then I'm going to bring that white yarn back and then pull through the last 2 loops. And then I'm going to drop the blue yarn. I'm not going to carry it anymore. And I'm going to go ahead and just complete normal double crochets all the way down to the end of this row. And now for this next row, I'm just going to double crochet all the way up until I reach the very first of the blue stitches. And now into the very first of the blue stitches, so the first stitch of the star design, I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to pick up that blue yarn so it's on top of my hook, and then I'm going to place a double crochet. I'm only going to complete half of the double crochet like so, and then I'm going to drop my yarn and switch to blue, and then pull that blue yarn through. And now we are going to do 9 blue double crochet stitches, again carrying that white yarn with you along the way, and this should bring you all the way down until you are 1 stitch away from the last blue stitch here. And now into the 9th stitch here of the blue double crochet, I'm going to go ahead and switch colors, so I'm going to just do those first 2 loops and then switch over to white and pull that white yarn through the last 2 loops like so. And now previously we would just drop the blue yarn and then continue with those white double crochets, but in this case I'm actually going to carry that blue yarn with me for 1 more stitch. So I'm going to do a double crochet right here into the very last of the blue stitches, and I'm going to make sure that blue yarn is on top of my hook as I complete this stitch, like so. And now I'm going to go ahead and drop that blue yarn and then just complete normal double crochets all the way down to the end of the row. And now for this next row, I'm just going to go ahead and double crochet all the way up until I am 2 stitches away from the very first blue stitch of that star design. And now that I am 2 stitches away here, I'm going to insert my hook into that first stitch. I'm going to make sure the blue yarn here is on top of my hook, and then I'm going to pull the white yarn through and then complete half of a double crochet and then switch over to the blue yarn, like so. And now we're going to go ahead and complete 11 blue double crochets, which should bring you from this side of the star over to 1 stitch past the blue stitch of the previous row. And now into the 11th stitch here, I'm going to go ahead and switch back to white. So I'm going to pull through those first 2 loops and then switch over to the white yarn and then pull through those last 2 loops. And just like we did in that previous row, I'm going to carry the blue yarn with me for just 1 more stitch. So I'm going to insert my hook right into the next stitch, make sure the blue yarn is on top of my hook, and then complete that double crochet. And now I'm going to go ahead and drop that blue yarn and then just complete normal double crochets all the way down to the end of the row. And now with this row, I'm going to double crochet again until I am just 2 stitches away from that very first blue stitch of the star design. Okay, and now that I am about 2 stitches away from my very first blue stitch for the star, I'm already yarning over for that double crochet. I'm going to sort of scoop up that blue yarn so it's on top of my hook, insert my hook into the next stitch, and then complete half of a double crochet, like so. And then I'm going to drop the white yarn over to the wrong side, so the front of the project in this case, pick up that blue yarn and pull it through those last 2 loops like so. And now we're going to be completing 13 blue double crochets, of course carrying that white yarn along with you as you go, and this should bring you from 1 stitch prior to the blue of the previous row to 1 stitch after the blue of the previous row. And now into this 13th double crochet, I'm going to complete half of the double crochet and then switch over to white, like so. And now like we've been doing before, I'm going to go ahead and carry this blue yarn with me for 1 more stitch. So I'm going to make sure that blue yarn is on top of my hook and then complete a double crochet. And then I'm going to go ahead and just drop the blue yarn and then double crochet like normal all the way back to the end of the row. In this row, I'm just going to be double crocheting up until I am just 2 stitches away from that very first stitch of the star design. And now at this point here, I'm going to go ahead and insert my hook right into the next stitch. I'm going to take that blue yarn and put it up and over my hook so that way it's resting on top of the hook, and then pull my yarn through, complete half of a double crochet, and then switch over to the blue yarn, like so. And now we are going to be doing 15 stitches of blue double crochet, which should bring you from 1 stitch before the very first blue stitch of the previous row, so 1 stitch before, all the way to 1 stitch after the very last stitch of the previous row. And now in this last blue double crochet, I'm going to switch over to white, so I'm going to complete just half of that double crochet and then bring that white yarn through like so. And then as we've been doing before with these rows, I'm going to carry that blue yarn for just 1 more stitch. So right into this next stitch, I'm going to bring that blue yarn on top of my hook, complete a double crochet, and then just double crochet like normal all the way down to the end of the row. So after completing just 9 rows of the star design, this panel now sits comfortably below my arms, and so now I want to begin making the armholes on the sides. So continuing along with the star design, we are also going to now be decreasing at the start and the end of each row. So what I'm going to do here is I already chained 2 and turned my work, and now instead of yarning over and completing that first double crochet, I'm just going to insert my hook right into that first stitch there, pick up some yarn. So now I have 2 loops here on my hook, and then I'm going to insert my hook right into the next stitch and then pick up some yarn. So now we have 3 loops on our hook, and now we can complete a normal double crochet, therefore turning 2 stitches into just 1. So that's our first decrease of the project, and now we're going to go ahead and just double crochet like normal until you are just 2 stitches away from the very first blue stitch here of the star design. And now that I am just 2 stitches away from that very first stitch for the star, I'm going to go ahead and scoop up that blue yarn on top of my hook, insert my hook right into the next stitch like so, and then complete half a double crochet. So I'm going to pull through those first 2 loops, and then when I have just 2 loops left, I'm going to drop the white yarn on the wrong side and then pick up that blue yarn and pull it through both loops. And now we're going to go ahead and do 17 double crochets with this blue yarn, which is going to take you from 1 stitch before the blue stitch of the previous row all the way to 1 stitch after the blue stitch of the previous row. And now in this last stitch here, I'm going to go ahead and complete half a double crochet. So I'm pulling through those first 2 loops, and then I'm going to switch over to the white yarn and then pull through those last 2 loops. And then I'm going to drop the blue yarn here. I'm not going to carry it anymore. And then I'm going to go ahead and just place double crochets like normal all the way until I am 2 stitches away from the end of the row. And so now here, when there's only 2 stitches remaining in the row, we're going to go ahead and complete that second decrease. So I'm just going to go ahead and insert my hook right into that first stitch, pick up some yarn and pull it through, and then insert my hook right into the second stitch, pick up some yarn and pull it through. And then we're going to go ahead and complete a double crochet, therefore turning 2 stitches into 1. I'm then going to chain 2 and turn my work, and we're going to complete another decrease right away at the start of this row. So right into that first stitch, we're going to insert our hook and pick up some yarn, and then right into the second stitch here, insert your hook and pick up some yarn, and then complete a double crochet. Like so. I am then going to go ahead and complete double crochets like normal all the way down until I reach the very first stitch of the star design. So now I have reached the very first stitch there for the star design, and we're going to continue doing white double crochet, only now I'm just making sure that I'm carrying that blue yarn with me, so I'm keeping the blue yarn on top of my hook as I go along, and I'm just going to go ahead and do 6 double crochet stitches with the white yarn on top of the blue for the star. And then right here in that 6th stitch, we're going to go ahead and switch colors, so I'm going to do half a double crochet and then switch over to blue, and then pull that blue yarn through those remaining 2 loops like so. And now carrying that white yarn with me, I'm going to go ahead and do 5 stitches of blue. And now into this 5th stitch here, I'm going to go ahead and switch colors, so I'm doing half a double crochet with that blue, and then I'm going to pick up the white yarn and then pull that white yarn through the blue stitches there, or the loops. And now I'm going to drop the blue yarn. I'm not going to carry it along with me, and I'm just going to double crochet like normal all the way down until I'm 2 stitches away from the end of the row. And to make sure you have your count correct, you should have 6 stitches remaining on top of this blue here. So you're going to double crochet like normal, but 6 of those stitches should be on top of the blue. Now that we have reached the last 2 stitches of the row, I'm going to go ahead and complete another decrease. So I'm going to insert my hook right into that first stitch and pick up some yarn, and then insert my hook into the second stitch and pick up some more yarn. So I have 3 loops there on my hook, and I'm going to go ahead and double crochet like so, therefore completing a decrease. I'm then going to chain 2 and then turn my work, and now at the start of this row we're going to do another decrease. So I'm inserting my hook into the first stitch, picking up some yarn, and then into the second stitch, picking up some more yarn, and then completing a double crochet. And then you're going to go ahead and double crochet like normal all the way up until you reach the very first stitch of the star design. And now during this very last double crochet before we reach the star design, I'm going to go ahead and switch colors. So I'm doing half a double crochet, and then I'm dropping that yarn and then picking up the blue yarn and pulling that through the 2 loops like so. And now I will be doing 5 blue double crochets, which should line up perfectly with the same number of double crochets of the previous row. And now during this very last stitch, I'm going to make sure I switch colors. So I'm doing just half a double crochet, and then I'm switching right over to white, and I'm going to pull that white yarn through those last 2 loops. I'm then going to drop the blue yarn. I'm not going to carry it anymore. And then I'm just going to double crochet like normal all the way down until I am just 2 stitches away from the end of the row. And now with these final 2 stitches of the row here, I'm going to go ahead and complete a decrease, therefore turning 2 stitches into 1. I'm then going to chain 2, turn my work. I am then going to start the next row here with yet another decrease, like so. And then I'm just going to double crochet like normal all the way down until I reach the very first stitch of the star design. So now into the very first stitch here of the star design, I'm going to go ahead and just place another normal double crochet, and I'm going to make sure that blue yarn is on top of my hook before I do so. and then halfway through that double crochet, I'm going to switch over to the blue yarn, pulling that yarn through the remaining 2 loops of that double crochet. I am then going to go ahead and place 3 double crochets here with the blue yarn, which should bring you to the second to last stitch of the star design. And now during this 3rd stitch, I'm going to pause once I'm halfway through the double crochet and then switch over to the white yarn. I'm then going to drop that blue yarn, I'm not going to carry it with me, and then into this final blue stitch of the previous row, I'm going to place a white double crochet, and then just double crochet like normal all the way down to the last 2 stitches of the row. And so now at the end of this row, I'm going to go ahead and complete that decrease like so, and then I'm going to chain 2 and turn my work. So now we're almost done with the star design. We just have 2 rows left here. So I'm going to start off this row with another decrease. So I'm just going to turn these 2 stitches into 1, completing that double crochet there. And then I'm going to go ahead and just double crochet like normal all the way up until I reach that star design. In this last double crochet here, I'm going to go ahead and switch colors. So I'm just doing half the double crochet. I'm dropping the yarn onto the wrong side of the project. I'm going to pick up that blue yarn and pull it through the last 2 loops there. And then I'm going to go ahead and complete 3 double crochets here with the blue yarn, which should line up perfectly with the double crochets of the previous row. So I'm just going to do 3 stitches here, and in this 3rd stitch, I'm going to switch back to the white yarn. So I'm doing half a double crochet, dropping the yarn to the wrong side, picking up that white yarn, and pulling it through the last 2 loops like so. And then we're going to go ahead and drop that blue yarn. I don't need that anymore, and I'm just going to double crochet like normal all the way down until I am just 2 stitches away from the end of the row. And now with our last 2 stitches here of the row, I'm going to go ahead and just decrease like so, chain 2, and then turn my work. And now we are on to the final row for the star design. So I'm going to go ahead and start this row with another decrease like so, and then I'm just going to double crochet like normal up until I reach that very first stitch of the star design. And then into the very first stitch here of the star design, I'm going to place a double crochet, making sure that that blue yarn is on top of my hook as I do so. And then I'm going to go ahead and switch colors, so halfway through this stitch, I'm going to drop the white yarn, pick up that blue yarn, and pull it through the remaining 2 loops. And now we're just going to do 1 stitch of blue here at the very top of the star. So I'm going to go ahead and place 1 double crochet, and halfway through this stitch again I'm going to switch right back to that white yarn, and then I'm going to place a double crochet right into this last stitch here of the star design, and then just double crochet like normal all the way down until I am just 2 stitches away from the end of the row. And now in these last 2 stitches I'm going to go ahead and complete yet another decrease like so. And now we finally have that completed star design. So I'm going to go ahead and cut the blue yarn, and I'm going to cut it leaving a little bit of a tail here. That way we can weave that in later. So now you are going to want to add a couple more rows to the top of this panel. So you're just going to do simple double crochet like we did on the bottom here. Only make sure you are still decreasing at the start and the end of each row as I've been demonstrating. And the number of rows you do on top of the star is really up to you. You can measure this by holding the top of the panel up to your collarbone, and then continue until you like the length of the entire panel and where it lands on your body. So I ended up adding 3 more rows of that double crochet beyond the star design, which when I hold it right up to my collar here, brings us down to about my waistline, a little bit above my waistline, which is perfect. So now we're going to go ahead and mark the collar, which I've already done. I marked it here with these bobby pins, but what you're going to do is you're going to hold this up to your collar, and you're just going to sort of mark where you want the straps of the tank top to start. And keep in mind that the straps are going to start wide, and then they're going to very quickly shrink because we are going to be decreasing. So you kind of want to underestimate how wide you want the neckline to be. So typically I would probably go about here, but because I know I'm going to be quickly decreasing the straps, I'm going to underestimate and just bring it in a little bit more and do a little bit of a more narrow neckline than what I originally would plan. So the first thing that you're going to want to do is make sure that these stitches here that we marked previously are evenly spaced. So I'm going to count from this side of the project to this stitch marker, and then from this side of the project to this stitch marker. Okay, so I have 16 stitches here on the right side, and then I'm going to count over here on the left side. And then I only have 15 stitches on this side, so I'm going to go ahead and just move this little bobby pin over one stitch. That way I can have 16 stitches on both sides here. So now we can go ahead and get started on the very first strap. Now when it comes to both the width and the length of each strap, that really is up to personal preference. You may have to adjust the thickness or the length of the straps for yourself, but I'm going to walk you through the exact number of decreases and rows that I'm doing for my top. But just make sure that you hold this panel up to your collarbone quite often and then measure the straps. They should come up to about the top of your shoulder, halfway over your shoulder, so when you make the second panel they can meet perfectly in the middle of your shoulder. So you may have to adjust by adding or taking away rows and then adding or taking away decreases. But I'm just going to show you the exact method that I am using for the straps here on this top. So I'm going to go ahead and pick up this yarn that I left behind when I was just trying on the top, like so, and I already chained 2, so I'm going to just turn my work. And now right away we're going to begin with a decrease. So again, I'm inserting my hook into the first stitch and then the second stitch, picking up some yarn both times and then completing a double crochet. I'm now going to double crochet all the way up until I am just 2 stitches away from that stitch marker. So I'm not going to complete the entire row, I'm just going to go up to the stitch marker or the bobby pin here, but I'm going to pause once I am 2 stitches away from that stitch marker. I am now just 2 stitches away from this bobby pin or stitch marker here, so now I'm going to go ahead and complete a decrease. So I'm inserting my hook into the first stitch and then the second stitch, picking up some yarn both times and then doing a double crochet. So now I can go ahead and remove this first stitch marker. So I'm going to go ahead and chain 2 and then turn my work. And now to start off this row, I'm going to go ahead and do a decrease and then double crochet right back until I am 2 stitches away from the end of the row. And now here in these remaining 2 stitches of the row, I'm going to go ahead and complete yet another decrease and then chain 2 and turn my work. So now here on the outside of the panel, you can see where we've been doing that decrease along the edge of the rows, and it makes sort of this slope in. And I am now happy with the amount of the slope that we have. I don't want to make this any more narrow, so I am now going to stop decreasing on the outside portion of the strap, and I will only be decreasing here along the neckline. So starting off with this row, I'm not going to complete a decrease, I'm just going to double crochet like normal until I am just 2 stitches away from the inside of the strap at the end of the row. And so now here in these last 2 stitches, I'm going to go ahead and complete a decrease because I will still be decreasing here along the neckline, like so. I'm then going to do 2 more rows in this exact same manner. So I'm going to chain 2, turn my work, and now for these next 2 rows, I am only decreasing along the neckline here. So I'm going to start off with a decrease, like so, and then double crochet like normal all the way down to the very start of the row, like so. And now I'm going to chain 2 and then turn my work. And now from here, I'm just going to double crochet like normal all the way until I reach the last 2 stitches of the row, which is right along the neckline portion. And then right at the end here, I'm going to go ahead and complete a decrease with these 2 stitches, like so. And now I don't want to make the strap any more narrow, so I'm going to stop decreasing now, and instead I'm just going to chain 2 and turn my work. And now I am just going to quickly complete 2 rows of normal double crochet without any decreasing on either side. So I've now completed those last 2 rows, and the strap is the perfect length that when I hold this part up here to my collarbone, the strap reaches the very top of my shoulder, which is perfect. And I ended up doing 7 rows in total here for this strap. So now we're going to go ahead and cast off. So I'm just going to chain 1, and then I'm going to cut my yarn, leaving a little bit of a tail, that way I can weave it in later. And now I'm just going to pull my hook like so, therefore locking the yarn in place. And now we're going to go over to the other side of our project. I'm going to turn my work, and now I'm going to insert my hook into the very first stitch here of the row. And now I'm going to bring my same yarn here right back through, and I'm going to pick it up, bring it through the stitch, chain 1 to lock it in place, and then chain 1 more, so that way we have reached the height of the double crochet. And now we're just going to repeat the exact same process that we did with the other strap here on this side. So I'm going to begin with a decrease. So I'm picking up both stitches here and then placing 1 double crochet. And then I'm going to double crochet up until I am just 2 stitches away from that stitch marker. And now that I am 2 stitches away from the bobby pin or stitch marker here, I'm going to go ahead and decrease in these 2 stitches, like so. I'm then going to remove that bobby pin, we don't need that anymore. I'm going to chain 2 and then turn my work. And now we're going to start this row with yet another decrease. So I'm just decreasing these 2 stitches. And then I'm going to double crochet all the way down until I am just 2 stitches away from the end of the row. And now in these last 2 stitches of the row, I am again going to just complete a decrease. and then chain 2. And now just like on the other side here, I am perfectly happy with the amount of decreases that we have on this side. And so to match the other side, I'm now going to begin only decreasing along the neckline on the inside of the strap. So starting off here, I'm just going to double crochet like normal. I will not be doing a decrease on this side of the row. I'm just going to double crochet all the way up until I am just 2 stitches away from the end of the row. And then in these last 2 stitches here, I'm going to go ahead and create a decrease like so, chain 2, and then turn my work. And after turning my work, I'm again going to begin with a decrease, and then just double crochet like normal all the way down to the end of the row. And now I will not be decreasing on this side of the row, so I'm going to double crochet all the way to the last stitch, chain 2, and turn my work. And then I'm going to begin double crocheting, again no decrease, and I'm going to double crochet up until I am 2 stitches away from the end of the row. And then right here in these last 2 stitches, I'm going to go ahead and create a decrease. And now just like on the other side, this is as wide as I want the strap to be. I don't want to make it any thinner. So to copy the other side, we're just going to go ahead and chain 2. And then I'm just going to quickly complete 2 rows here of just normal double crochet with no decrease on either side. So now on this side, just like I did with the other strap over here, I've completed 7 rows in total. So now I'm going to go ahead and cast off. So I'm going to chain 1 and then cut my yarn, leaving just a little bit of a tail here, like so. And then I'm just going to pull my hook, therefore locking that yarn in place. And now here is our first panel completed. You're now going to follow this exact same tutorial to make a second panel. I will be making 2 panels with the star design because I think it's kind of fun to have the star on both the front and the back of the tank top, but you can definitely just eliminate the star for the back panel and just use this solid color and then complete solid rows all the way up, and make sure you still begin decreasing at the same point as we did on this panel. That way they can match up perfectly. So go ahead and use this exact same tutorial to then make a second panel here. So I have now made a second identical panel to this first one that we made, and I'm now ready to assemble these together into a functional top. So what I'm going to do is first put the right sides together. So the wrong side here where we have the loose ends from the star, I'm putting this to the outside like so for this bottom panel. And then with this panel here, I want to make sure again that the right sides are together. So I have the wrong side here face up, therefore the wrong side is on the outside on both sides of this top. And now we're going to go ahead and slip stitch all the way along the sides of the panels. So I'm going to start over here on the right side, and I'm going to be switching to a smaller crochet hook. I'm going with a 3mm crochet hook. It doesn't really matter what size, you just want it to be smaller, that way you have more control over the yarn. So I'm going to insert my hook right into the very bottom right stitch here of this panel, so the very first stitch of the bottom of the panel, and then going to the second panel, I'm going to insert my hook into the exact same stitch on the other side, so that bottom right stitch like so. And now I'm going to bring more of that base color yarn, so more of this white or cream yarn, and I'm going to pull it through with my hook like so, chain 1 to lock it in place. And now we are going to be slip stitching, so I'm going to insert my hook here into the next part of the stitch, pick up some yarn, pull it through the stitches and then through that loop as well, therefore completing a slip stitch. And you want to make sure you're picking up the exact same stitch on both sides of each panel. So I'm picking up the first stitch on this first panel and then the next stitch on the second panel, and I'm making sure it's the exact same stitch on both sides, that way it's lined up perfectly the entire way, and I am slip stitching. And you do want to keep your tension quite loose for this portion of the panel as well, because if you slip stitch too tightly, it's going to sort of bunch in all of the stitches and it's going to have a weird ripple effect along the side of your shirt, which you don't want. So make sure you're also keeping your tension quite loose as you're slip stitching, and you're only going to work your way up until the first row of decreases. So as you go up along this panel side, you can see right here where the panel sort of dips in where we began doing those decreases. You only want to slip stitch up until that first row there before it starts to dip in for the armhole. Okay, so I've now slip stitched all the way up this entire side of both panels, and I paused here when I reached that first point of the decrease, as you can see. So now I'm going to go ahead and cast off. So I'm just going to chain 1 like so, and then I'm going to cut my yarn, again leaving that little bit of a tail, that way I can weave it in later. And then I'm just going to pull my hook, therefore pulling the yarn out and securing it in place. So here we have our first side of both of the panels attached, and now we're going to go ahead and do the exact same thing on the other side. So going over to the left side now of the panels, I'm going to repeat that exact same process starting in the very bottom corner here. I'm going to make sure that I have all the stitches lined up as I slip stitch up this side, securing both of the panels together. And again, I'm going to make sure that I only go up until I reach that first row where the decrease begins on the panels. And so you're just going to do the exact same thing that you did on this side of the panels over on this side, therefore securing both sides of the panel together. So now I have both sides of the top secured. As you can see here, I just slip stitched up both sides, and now we're going to go ahead and do the exact same thing on the top with the straps. So I'm just going to hold the two straps together right here at the top. I'm going to insert my hook right into the very first right corner here, and then picking up that same stitch on the other side like so. I am then simply going to pull my yarn through, chain one to lock it in place, and then just like we did on the sides of the panels, I'm just going to begin slip stitching this together. So again, I'm making sure that the stitches are lined up, I'm keeping my tension quite loose, and I'm just slip stitching all the way along the top of this strap, therefore securing the two panels together. Like so, and after slip stitching into that last stitch there, I'm going to go ahead and chain one and then cut my yarn, again leaving that little bit of a tail. I'm then just going to pull my hook, therefore securing that yarn in place. So now the basics of the top is completed. Like, this is just a fully functioning tank top now, but we're going to go ahead and add some little detailing as well. So at this point, I do recommend switching over to a weight 4 yarn because it's going to give a sturdier look to the edges of the top, because all of this is quite loose and thin yarn. So it has that very light, flimsy look, which is super cute, but you kind of want to have that just more structured build on the outside of the tops, and that way it just looks a little bit more professional. But perhaps that's just personal preference, and you are more than welcome to just go ahead and use the same accent color as we did with the star for the border as well. If you do use the same accent color, the same weight 2 yarn, I do recommend then switching to a smaller crochet hook because you want to have tighter stitches for this part. So instead of using that 6mm crochet hook, I would go in with more of a 3 or a 4mm crochet hook. But for this case, I am switching to weight 4 acrylic yarn and a 5mm crochet hook. So what we're going to do is we're going to start at the very bottom here, and I'm just going to pick any one of these stitches along the bottom of this top here. So I'm just going to go with this stitch here. I'm going to insert my hook right into that stitch and then bring my weight 4 yarn through. So then I'm just going to pull this yarn right through the stitch like so, chain one to lock it in place. And now I'm simply going to be placing one single crochet into every single stitch all the way along the bottom here. So I will see you once I've made my way around this entire bottom and I've reached the start of the row again. I have now successfully worked my way around the entire bottom here with single crochets, and I've reached that very first stitch that we made. So I'm going to go ahead and insert my hook right into that first single crochet, and I'm going to pick up this yarn and then just slip stitch like so, therefore bringing that entire row to a close. I'm then going to chain one and then cut my yarn, like always, leaving that little bit of a tail so I can weave it in later. And then I'm going to pull my hook, therefore locking that yarn in place. So there we have our first little border here on the bottom of the tank top. And now you're going to follow that exact same method to then add a border to the neckline here and then also to the armhole. So just like we did before, you're going to pick any one of these stitches, insert your hook right into that stitch, bring the yarn through, and then begin single crocheting. And you want to go all the way around the opening of the neck hole here, all the way around the opening of the armhole, and then the other armhole here on this side, just like we did at the bottom of the tank top. This exact same method, you're just going to repeat it now up here on the top of the tank top. Okay, so I've now added that little border of the blue to the bottom here, as I've already shown you, and then to both of the armholes as well as the neck hole here at the top. So now what I'm going to do is just weave in all of the loose ends, and then once that's done, I'm going to just flip the shirt right side out like so that the right side can be on the outside and we can have the best version of the design facing out. Like so. And then ideally all these ends would be woven in, which I'm going to do here shortly. And then that is the completed tank top. I really hope that you liked this tutorial and that you found it easy to follow and that you liked the way the tank top turned out. If you wanted to share any pictures with me, I would love to see those. Feel free to tag me in anything you post on Instagram, and also you could just send me a picture to my DMs if you wanted to instead. I always love to see what you guys end up doing with my designs, so I really look forward to seeing that. And if you haven't already, then please consider subscribing because I am trying to reach 10,000 subscribers in the next couple of months. So if you could help me reach that goal, I would appreciate that so much. And also like this video, leave a comment down below. I love reading all of your comments, and I look forward to talking to you again soon, either in the comment section or in my next video. So I will see you again very soon. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and until next time, goodbye.